Good, good. So I was just looking back, Jonathan said, what are we going to talk about? And I'm leaning back and I was working at my computer, so it was not for optimal catching me on the.
Right.
Yeah.
I always have to adjust mine too. Yeah.
So, yeah, we were just talking about like if we were going to talk about internal gutters, but did you have a question or were you just popping on?
I did. We had in Lewis, the planning commission divides up into some different committees, and
Okay.
And one committee had a Zoom meeting today that I listened to because it had the potential for impacting the historic district. And they talked about increasing the required elevation of a structure, no matter where it occurred, historic district or otherwise, in an attempt
for a sea rise. Is that
right?
Okay.
Sea rise. Now, currently, if it's a new building or a major renovation, then they have to be compliant with the flood district,
right,
and the code. And they start out with, I think this is currently in code. They start out with the freeboard has to be 18 inches above grade,
which probably isn't enough.
That's where you start. Even if
well,
you're not,
but if that's where your skirt board for the porch would be, yeah, that 18 inches probably, you probably would still get flooding on your first floor if there was a lot of.
Yeah, but then, so that's the minimum of any new construction or anything else. And then on top of that, they're talking about coming up with a formula that projects out
right
100 years or something like
right.
that, based on projections for the area. So my question is, because we've encountered this in the historic district, where the current historic house was, just sitting a step
right.
or two above, like all the other older houses in its neighborhood. And in order for the applicant, the owner, to get a mortgage, they had to raise the house
right.
Above the floodplain level for that site. And of course, it pushed it up almost a full floor. I forget exactly what it was. I don't have those documents
like
anymore.
10 or 12 feet.
Or even maybe 8 feet. It was up there. Yeah. So, we've done a lot of, the Historic Commission has done some research, and we've attended some lectures that the state has put on, because I've gone to the state historic, whatever they call themselves.
The State Office of Historic Preservation.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And so I asked them, because, supposedly the guidelines are that if a historic structure is contributing, you cannot alter its elevation.
Right.
That's been. So I asked if they had any guidelines for that, and what the heck do we do? And if there was any guidelines from the national level, from the parks.
Yes.
Whatever they are. And so evidently, no, everybody's had their head in the sand, and they just not going to deal with it.
And this is a problem in many historic cities, because a lot of our historic cities and a lot of our oldest buildings in the country are built right on the water, because you want it to be close to the water.
Yeah, because
so it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, that's just how they were, because the water transportation was so important. And so, you've got Savannah and Charleston. We've got several cities.
Boston.
And we've got
New Orleans. New Orleans has been flooded multiple times.
Yeah, Annapolis. And and then there's several cities. And there's a woman by the name of Dominique Hawkins, who has done 2 fantastic studies. I think you can find them online.
Okay.
She did one for the state of Maryland, and then the second one she did for the state of New Jersey, which is a little, she sort of built on what she did for the first one.
Right.
And of course, I've been sending it to the governor and everybody else. And of course,
Right.
this year is not the year that anybody's going to approve any additional
Right,
expenditures.
right. I just had a conversation, one of the podcast recordings about that yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, because they were talking about the state tax credits, and Pennsylvania doesn't have a huge state tax credit, but it's like $5 million that they divide up among the 5 regions. And they haven't funded it yet this year. And she's like, I don't know if they're going to. So if it's important to you, everybody call your legislator.
Wow, yeah, that's a good question. I haven't looked into that. What I haven't heard from is the state to do funding. We've been resurveying our historic district, and I think we have about just one more phase to do. And usually I get notifications. I usually get notifications in April and May, to have the contract in June. And here it is.
Because that's the beginning of the fiscal year, or the end of the fiscal year.
And here it is July, and nobody has heard a word and knows anything about it. So it's on my list of calls to make. Yeah. So, of course, they're a pass-along agency.
Right. Yeah. They have to deal with. Yeah. They have to just deal with whatever they get sent.
Right.
But Lisa Craig, she was a podcast guest maybe in April. She was the historic preservation planner for Annapolis, and she spent about 5 years figuring out what Annapolis was going to do with their historic buildings. I don't think we have any option. Well, okay, I will say I don't think we have any option but to raise them. And I think that if we're going to do it, we need to do it to a level that we don't have to revisit it. Because I have interviewed a house mover, and he told me that there's a couple houses that he's done at the beach where they have had to go back to the same house multiple times because it's gotten flooded again, and so then they have to raise it a little bit more. So I think that if we're going to do it, I think it should be once and done. Raise it as high as it's going, that it
could possibly get.
That's my feeling. I don't know what other. So I'm saying I don't know what other option we have, but I did see.
What did you say? Lisa's. What was Lisa's last name? What is Lisa's last name?
Craig.
Craig.
Yeah. CRAIG. But the other thing,
well, I think,
the other thing that I've seen, that I think they were kind of playing with in Massachusetts at a national park site was making a building floodable. So pretty much everything on the lower level was able to be removed and put back once. So like they had like their plaster on panels. Did you remember that picture I showed you? I didn't see the seminar. I just saw the picture of it, but everything could be taken off. So you pretty much just had the framing and how everything could flood. And then once everything dries out, you could go and put everything back in. And I have that picture. I can send it, and I'll make sure that I post it in the comments here.
Not to be a smart ass, but that seems like a lot more work
than once and done.
And more problematic than just raise the thing up.
Yeah.
Well, you raise it up anyway. You're still raising you have basically a ground floor, garage, storage, knockout walls. You design that floor to be able to flood, clean up, and just deal with it. Right. And then your first occupied floor is the floor above it.
Right.
And so they do that a lot in the beach area here in Lewis.
Yeah. Well, and this one was like a historic, it looked like a little cottage, but I will definitely post that. And it was something that the National Park Service, like their technical training area, was trying. And that was in Massachusetts. And I'll find that picture.
The hard part is when you take a historic building, and it may be sitting a foot off grade or even 3 feet off grade, and then you raise it to 8 feet, and how to do that in a sensitive fashion. It's the how do you do it, and still have the historic house look like a historic house and not an oddball.
Right. I think that you would take the same approach that you would take with a sympathetic addition. I think you would show that the whatever level was like new.
Yeah, you'd raise everything up from the very bottom up, and then whatever's from the base down below, whatever that's new, that's new.
Right.
Because you could technically, though, we'll just say funds are unlimited. You could even build like a dirt mound under all that. You know what I mean? To make it look like a little island.
Oh yeah,
But I'm just saying,
that might erode.
but that could erode away eventually too. But at least if you build it underneath with new materials and keep the old as close to the bottom, a
Yeah.
separating point line, you can at least say, look, from there up is the old building, from there down is what we had to do because of
Mhm.
the climate change. And if we wanted to save it and keep it and know our historical building history, we had to do it. We don't have a choice. It's either that or completely lose it. Because even say on the first floor building floods and it goes up 7-8 feet, well, you kiss all those windows and doors goodbye because they're just rotted out.
They
So
might dry it. Well, you mean if it was underwater for the long period of time?
Yeah.
No, you're not just talking about like the
Depending-
100-year flood. You're talking about like if it's underwater completely.
yeah, because that's looking like what's going to be happening if we don't get our head out of our butt. And at that point, you're ruining floors, doors, trim,
You're
a
losing more.
ton of stuff versus just raise it up and build a new structure underneath that could withstand the water and everything.
And I would say differentiate between the old and the new. And I think it would be the same principles in the Secretary of Interior's as adding an addition on. Are most of the houses do most of the older houses have basements? I'm just curious. Like, was that
No, it's every once in a while there are some. It's kind of some of the old cottages on the beach have basements. It's interesting. Our beach is actually the bay. It's the Delaware Bay right before it goes into the ocean, and then there's a canal. So Lewis, the portion of Lewis, which we call Lewis Beach, is actually a barrier island because it's got the bay, it's got an inlet, it's got the Lewis Rehoboth Canal, and then at the other end, which is all the way down in Bethany, then there's another inlet. So so on the beach side, there are high dunes. And that side never floods. It floods.
Well, yeah, because you still have the natural barriers. Now, I will tell you what, and it's not really applicable here, but we were in Oregon a few years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And just in my lifetime, because my great-grandparents had a beach house there. My grandparents then had it. And just in my lifetime, the difference, like now, it used to be like a gradual slope to go up and over the dune. Now it's like a 4-foot drop.
Oh, it's more than that in places.
Yeah, and the erosion from the winters and everything is really
it's bad. Yeah. Like in the past, we go out every 5 years or so. In the past 10 years, it's gotten from maybe a foot slope to there's spots where there's like 8-foot drop offs.
Yeah. And then
you mean it's higher? Is it higher than it was?
It's eroding it
it's just
completely
a drop
back
off. So it used to be like a slope, like a slope to get down onto actually the beach. Now it's just that slope has eroded.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that natural barrier is getting taken back into the ocean. So I feel bad for the people who have houses right there on the beach. We did see a house that had actually it was a new house and it did not fit at all. It was terrible. But they had built it too close and they were losing the house. Because the natural the state EPA would not let them put barriers up in front of it, and it was just collapsing into the ocean.
Yeah, I was this past February, we drove down to see my brother in Florida, and friends were renting a place, and we went over there and walked the beach a little bit, and this is on the Gulf side, and this was down south of Sarasota, I think it was. This really tiny community, and so there's been a lot of erosion on this beach, and it's not right on the Gulf. It's a waterway that goes into the Gulf, and so the municipality or whoever governs this area said, nope, no rebuilding, no adding more additional bulkheads. You cannot touch the coast. So if you've already done something, fine, but you don't get to repair it. You
Oh,
just have to
goodness.
live with
Yeah.
what nature is going to do. And so there were a couple houses that had kind of tilted in
Yeah.
and have already been abandoned. I mean, I don't know what the heck you do with insurance in that
I
situation.
don't know either. Yeah, and not
But
that it's exactly the same, but right around the corner from us. So our house was built in like 100 years ago, but it was a field, and a couple blocks away from us there was like pretty much like a dump, like that was like a municipal dump, and we did not know that when we moved in here. But we get sinkholes sometimes, and there's like 10 houses that had a sinkhole open up underneath them.
Oh my
And
God.
what's scary about that, now I'm not worried about our house, but what the homeowners insurance won't cover it, and the city's condemned it and won't let them in. So now you have a house that you're like obligated to pay for that you can't use, and the insurance company isn't going to do anything. So like I would be really upset if that was my house.
Well, down in Florida, where my brother and sister-in-law live, their previous house, they actually had sinkhole insurance.
Oh, did it?
And they and there was a bad storm, and they were starting to get some cracks in the floor, and so they called the insurance people, and they said, well, could be, and they did a lot of repairs for them, and then they canceled the policy.
Oh yeah, that's what they do.
And they're not right, and they're not writing. They're not. It seems they're not writing, or it's very hard now to get a sinkhole policy.
Yeah. So, very good.
So,
Well, I will send you that information that I saw that the Park Service was doing, and if you have any other questions, definitely let me know.
okay, yeah, it's just a very. The more I find out, the less answers I have, because it seems everybody is just
and I think that
trying
it's
to
something that
deal
the
with it.
preservation community is going to have to deal with because of all the historic properties that are in this position.
Right. Yeah. So, but if you have a chance, look up those two studies that Dominique Hawkins did. She's a great bio.
What is her last name again? Hawkins. Okay, I will definitely look those up.
And she did one for Maryland and one for New Jersey. New Jersey was the latest. And she has her own preservation architectural. I don't have the paperwork in front of me.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm sure if I type her name in, I can find it. I will definitely look those up. Thank you for that resource.
She did some really good drawings on what you can do as sections or elevations on what you can do to modify some stuff, and what causes some of this erosion. And I think it's applicable to the historic preservation.
Oh, definitely.
Mission.
I will take a look.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.